March of the Machine, The Aftermath is Magic's upcoming set, and we just got all of the cards from the set revealed, and we are starting to see the pre-order prices for them. So in this video, I'll be breaking down the top 10 most expensive cards from the set, so if you open a couple packs, you know exactly what to look for. I don't want to waste your time, so let's jump right into this. Starting with number 10, Nahiri Forged in Fury. This card is only going for $3.99, but it's pretty powerful. It's a 6-drop red and white 5/4 with affinity for equipment, so it's going to cost 1 less to cast for each equipment you control. Then, whenever an equipped creature you control attacks, exile the top card of your library. You may play that card this turn. Then, you may cast equipment spells this way without paying their mana cost. So you get to free cast some equipment, you want to put a lot of equipment down to make your commander cheap, and it is a generic, equipment style deck. What's a little interesting is normally we see commanders that boost your creatures for having equipment. This gets you card draw for having equipment, which I do think is a more powerful version, but we've seen a lot of cards that play in this space. Overall, Nahiri seems like it'll be a pretty fun commander, but it's not anything incredibly new. Next up, number 9 is Sarkhan Soul Aflame. This card is currently going for $4.99, and it's a 3-cost legendary 2/4 that says, dragon spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. And whenever a dragon enters the battlefield under your control, you may have Sarkhan become a copy of it until end of turn, except its name is Sarkhan and it's legendary in addition to its other types. So you can get 2 of some of the fun legendary dragons, at least temporarily, and it kind of lets you haste out dragons that normally don't have haste, because you can play it, have Sarkhan become a copy of it until end of turn, and since he was on the battlefield at the beginning of your upkeep, he can attack that turn. It's a really interesting card, and for 3 mana, reducing the cost of your spells, letting you kind of double up some of the value of your dragons, seems like a really fun dragon commander that takes it in a slightly different approach than some other dragon commanders we've seen, and it is kind of an interesting color combination for it as well. Next up is number 8, which is Calix, Guided by Fate. The card is currently going for $4.99, and it is a 3-cost Selesnya legendary enchantment creature 2/2 with Constellation. Whenever Calix or another enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. Then, whenever Calix or an enchanted creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you may create a token that's a copy of a non-legendary enchantment you control. Do this only once each turn. This is a really interesting card in my opinion. It is a kind of go wide enchantment deck, but it also is a go tall. You can go in multiple directions. You can copy your enchantment creatures or just be copying value enchantments. Imagine if you have a Sphere of Safety, for example, that makes it really expensive to attack you and you're just copying that every turn, making it incredibly hard to attack. This seems like it could be a pretty powerful deck if you threw in some enchantments that make things unblockable or have Island Walk or things like that to consistently get that damage trigger. I think there's a lot of really interesting ways you could build this as a commander, and I think it's really cool as a card overall, so yeah. Next up, number 7 is Narset Enlightened Exile. The card's currently going for $5.99, and it is a 4-cost Jeskai 3/4, and it says, creatures you control have prowess, and whenever Narset attacks, exile target non-creature, non-land card with mana value less than Narset's power from a graveyard and copy it. You may cast the copy without paying its mana cost. So it essentially lets you, quote-unquote, free cast cards from any player's graveyard as long as that card has lesser mana value than her power. This is very similar to her previous card, where she would let you attack and then cast non-creature spells from your library, but this one cares more about the graveyard, and I think it's a really, really cool card. First off, giving all your creatures prowess is something we really haven't seen, and in a deck full of non-creature spells, that can actually be a quite powerful ability. On top of that, the attack trigger is seriously powerful. You can hit things in your own graveyard, so if you stuff your graveyard with things like extra combat and extra turn spells, I think Narset could be a seriously powerful card, but it also just seems really fun. It kind of ticks all the boxes. It gets you, a little bit of extra basically card draw. It gives you a way to win the game with that prowess, and it gives you the ability to play with your opponent's cards. It screams really popular commander, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's one of the more popular commanders from the set, and right now it's only $5.99, which is not bad. Next up, number 6 is Nixilis Captive Kingpin. The card's currently going for $5.99, and it is a 4-cost black and red 4/3 with flying and trample, and it says, whenever one or more opponents each lose exactly 1 life, put a +1/+1 counter on Nixilis, and then exile the top card of your library. Until your next end step, you may play that card. I think there's a lot of ways you can build this deck, but you want to basically pick a subset of cards that are all dealing exactly 1 damage to each opponent or target opponent or anything like that, and it essentially lets you draw cards from it. You know, cards like Blood Artist are going to be really good in this deck and basically read whenever a creature dies, draw a card. And because of that, at just 4 mana, and the fact that he can kill people pretty easily with Flying and Trample, it means this is a pretty awesome commander. Next up, at number 5, is Kiora, Sovereign of the Deep. This card's going for $6.99, and it is a 5-cost green and blue legendary creature Merfolk Noble 4/5 with Vigilance and Ward 3, and it says, whenever you cast a Kraken, Leviathan, Octopus, or Serpent spell from your hand, look at the top X cards of your library where X is that spell's mana value. You may cast a spell with mana value less than X from among them without paying its mana cost. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. This is another one of those cards that screams Commander. Obviously, you know, things like Sunbird's Invocation or Cascade are very popular effects in Commander because they are very powerful, allowing you to basically cast 1 spell and automatically turn that into 2 spells without needing the mana for the second one is pretty powerful. And we have seen a lot of cards, especially recently, it feels like, that care about Krakens, Leviathans, Octopuses, and Serpents. And so I feel like we are starting to get to the point where we have enough cards for this to be a deck, and it's actually something I'll be looking at and maybe doing a video over soon, so that's pretty cool. But yeah, pretty awesome card, double spelling's powerful, Ward 3 on a commander's pretty good as well. Next up, number 4 is Tyvar the Bellicose. This is a $7.99 card that is a 5/4 for 4 that whenever one or more elves you control attack, they gain Death Touch until end of turn, and then each creature you control has, whenever a mana ability of this creature resolves, put a number of +1/+1 counters on it equal to the amount of mana this creature produced. This ability triggers only once each turn. So essentially it lets you take all of your creatures that are producing mana and make them get counters for each mana they produce. So if you have something that taps for 1, like a Llanowar Elves, you get 1 counter when it taps for that. Then if you have something that taps for 3, like a Llanowar Tribe, it gets 3 +1/+1 counters for that. And I think this creates a really interesting deck where you have to balance, like, do I attack? Do I tap them for mana? Do I tap them for mana even though I'm not going to spend the mana to make them bigger? Like, there's a lot of really interesting things here, and I think the idea of a mana dork deck is really interesting. So it's a really cool card that I'm excited to see played in Commander. Next up, number 3 is Nissa, Resurgent Animist. This card is currently going for $8.99, and it is a 3-cost green 3/3 with Landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, add 1 mana of any color. Then, if this is the second time this ability is resolved this turn, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal an elf or elemental card. Put that card into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. This is a powerful card. This is Lotus Cobra as a commander, and I think that is enough for it to be pretty good. Add on top of that the Elf and Elemental synergy. This seems like a card that is going to go in most landfall decks and can helm its own as well. It is mono green, which does limit it, but the best land cards are obviously in green. And so overall, I expect to see this in a lot of different places. For just 1 more mana than Lotus Cobra, you can get both a redundant effect, and if you happen to have any other elves or elementals, which by the way, happen to care about land a lot, like Omnath and other versions of elves that care about lands, we've seen a lot of them, you know, it can incidentally get you stuff. It's a pretty good card. I expect to see it a lot. Next up, number 2 is actually a reprint, and it is Training Grounds. This is a 1-cost blue enchantment that says activated abilities of creatures you control cost 2 less to activate. This effect can't reduce the mana in that cost to less than 1 mana. This is a very powerful card in any deck that cares about activated abilities, or has a commander that cares about activated abilities, or has an activated ability, I guess in that case. It is a very powerful card that has been expensive. It was, you know, $30-40 for one of them, and it is currently down to $9.99. It is a reprint. I think a lot of people know what Training Grounds is. It has some cool new art on it. It's a good card, and it's one of the only reprints in the entire set, so it's interesting to see. Alrighty, last up, number 1 is Karn Legacy Reforged. This card's currently going for $12.99, and it is a 5-cost, colorless, legendary artifact creature golem, star, whereas power and toughness are equal to the greatest mana value among artifacts you control. Then at the beginning of your upkeep, you get to add colorless for each artifact you control, and this mana can't be spent to cast non-artifact spells, similar to Power Stones. And then until end of turn, you don't lose this mana as steps and phases end. So you can use this mana to activate abilities or cast artifact spells, or, you know, pay cost of people trying to counter you with like a spell pierce or something. It's a very powerful card. I think a lot of artifact decks are just going to want to run this, and also people really love colorless commanders. It's kind of a challenge to be able to build around a colorless card because it means all of the cards in your deck have to be colorless, and I think a lot of people really like that. It gives you mana ramp, and it gives you the ability to win the game just straight through Karn as well. So I think it's going to be a cool card that we're going to see a decent amount of, but I don't know if it'll necessarily stay at $13, but it really depends on how it performs in formats outside of Commander. Alrighty, those are the top 10 most expensive cards in March of the Machine, the Aftermath. If you want to learn more about the set, you guys should check out this video here where I break down everything you need to know about Aftermath, including what the packs look like, the styles, the treatments, all of that. And check out this other video here that YouTube thinks you'll like from my channel. I'll see you guys in the next one.